The machine's swarm moved through space like a plague of metal locusts. Each ship was the size of a small moon, dark and hungry. They had been eating star systems for 300 years, and now they were close to finishing their meal council. Leader Zethkar stood in the command center of the last free world in the Centauri system. 6 arms moved quickly over the control panels, but nothing worked anymore. The defense fleet was gone. The orbital stations were silent. Soon the machines would come for his planet, too. "How many worlds have we lost this week?" he asked his aide. 7 systems, my lord. The Kethver homeworld fell yesterday. The Morden colonies are under attack now. Zethkar closed his large eyes. The Galactic Council had ruled over 1,000 worlds for 5,000 years. They had built cities that touched the clouds. They had cured every disease. They had brought peace to species that had fought each other for millions of years. But none of that mattered now. The machine swarm learned from every battle. When the Council used energy weapons, the machines built better shields. When they used missiles, the machines made faster interceptors. When they tried to run, the machines just followed them to new worlds and ate those too. Sir, we are receiving the final transmission from the Morden Defense Fleet. The main screen showed a Morden captain. His ship was burning around him. Swarm has adapted to our quantum torpedoes. They are no longer effective. We estimate 12 hours before planetary bombardment begins. Tell my family I died with honor.
Oh.
The transmission ended. Another species would be extinct by tomorrow. Zeeth Shakar Said, a young female named Silanara, spoke quietly. My lord, perhaps it is time to consider the forbidden option. You mean the emergency broadcast? Yes, sir. The Council banned contact with the Outer Rim worlds because their inhabitants were too primitive and violent. Perhaps that violence could help us now. Zethkar had been thinking the same thing. The Galactic Council had spent centuries avoiding the dangerous species that lived on harsh worlds. These creatures fought constantly, used crude weapons, and seemed to enjoy conflict. The Council had decided long ago that such beings were too barbaric to join civilized society. But civilized society was dying. Prepare the emergency broadcast, Zethkar ordered. Send it to all known worlds in the galaxy, even the forbidden sectors. The message was simple. Any species that could fight was welcome to try. The galaxy was ending, and the Council would take help from anyone. On the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Helen Carter was working the night shift at the Arecibo Deep Space Array. She had been monitoring space signals for 15 years, and most nights were quiet. Earth's radio telescopes picked up natural cosmic radiation, pulsar signals, and sometimes interference from satellites. But tonight was different. The signal came in at 3:47 a.m. Earth time. It was clearly artificial, unlike anything Helen had ever seen. The pattern was complex and repeated every few minutes. Whatever was sending it had technology far beyond anything humans had built. Helen called her supervisor. Dr. Ben Walsh at home. Ben, you need to get down here. We've got something big. Ben arrived within an hour, still wearing his pajamas under his lab coat. He was a linguist who specialized in pattern recognition, and he had been waiting his whole life for a signal. Like this. Play it again, he said, staring at the computer screen. The signal was beautiful in its complexity. Mathematical patterns mixed with what looked like language structures. There were star charts, technical diagrams, and something that looked like a desperate plea for help. It's definitely artificial, Helen said. It's coming from the direction of Centauri. Ben worked for 6 hours straight, using every code-breaking program the facility had. The breakthrough came when he realized the signal was using prime numbers as a base language. From there, he could start to decode the actual message. When he finally understood what the aliens were saying, Ben's face went pale. Helen, call the Pentagon. Call the UN. Call everyone. We need to wake up every government leader on the planet. What does it say? It says the galaxy is being destroyed by machines. It says billions of people are already dead. It's asking for help. Any species that can fight is being asked to come and help save everyone. Helen stared at the screen. They're asking us to join an alien war? Not just asking, they're begging? Within 12 hours, the signal had been confirmed by radio telescopes around the world. The message was the same everywhere. An alien civilization was crying out for help, and they were sending the message to every star system they could reach. The world's governments held emergency meetings. Military leaders studied the tactical data that was included in the signal. Scientists worked around the clock to understand the alien technology. General Lisa Brooks was in charge of the Pentagon's response team. She had spent 30 years in the military, fighting in conflicts around the world. She understood war better than most people, but this was different. According to the signal, this machine swarm has been destroying star systems for 3 centuries, she told the Joint Chiefs. They've wiped out hundreds of species. The aliens who sent this message are running out of options. What kind of help are they asking for? Asked Admiral Clark Ross. Military assistance. They want us to send warships and soldiers to help fight these machines. The room was quiet for a long moment. The idea of humans fighting in space alongside aliens seemed like science fiction. But the signal was real, and the alien civilization was clearly desperate. What do we know about these machines? Asked General Brooks. They're called the Void Swarm. They consume entire planets to build more machines. They learn from every battle and adapt their tactics. The aliens say they've tried everything and nothing works. Captain Jake Morrison had been listening to the app. Briefing from the back of the room, he was the commander of the UES Defiance, the most advanced warship Earth had ever built. It was still in the testing phase, but it was the closest thing humanity had to a real space combat vessel. General Brooks, if I may, he said, the aliens say they've tried everything, but they haven't tried human tactics. What do you mean? Look at their battle reports. They fight like everything has to be perfect. Oh. They use long-range weapons and try to avoid casualties. They retreat when things go wrong. That's not how humans fight. General Brooks nodded slowly. Humans had been fighting each other for their entire history. Earth was a dangerous planet where only the strongest survived. Humans had learned to be aggressive, adaptable, and willing to take risks that other species might consider suicidal. You think we could make a difference? I think we're exactly what they need. They've been fighting this war like civilized beings. Maybe it's time to fight it like barbarians. The decision was made that night. Earth would answer the alien call for help. The EU's Defiance would lead a small fleet to the coordinates provided in the signal. Captain Morrison would make first contact with the alien civilization and assess whether humanity could help win an interstellar war, as the Defiance prepared for launch. Dr. Helen Carter received one final transmission from the Centauri system. It was weaker than the others, barely strong enough to reach Earth. This is our last message, the alien voice said. The machines will be here in days. If anyone receives this signal, please remember us. We tried to bring peace to the galaxy. We failed. Helen looked up at the stars and whispered, "Help is coming. The Deathworlders are coming." The jump took 3 days. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the stars blur past the view screen. Behind him, the rest of the human fleet followed in formation. 5 destroyers, 2 cruisers, and a supply ship. It was everything Earth could spare for this mission. "Jump complete, sir," reported Navigation Officer Lisa Park. "We're at the coordinates from the alien signal." Jake looked at the tactical display. Space around them was empty except for debris fields that stretched for millions of miles. Whatever. Battle had happened here. It had been massive. "Sensors are picking up movement," said Lieutenant Commander Kate Sullivan from the weapons station. "Multiple contacts heading this way fast." The main screen showed sleek alien ships approaching. Their hulls were smooth and curved, nothing like the angular designs of human vessels. They moved with perfect formation, like they were dancing through space. "Incoming transmission," reported Communications Officer Ryan Davis, put it through. Screen filled with the image of an alien, unlike anything humans had ever seen. It had 6 arms, large eyes that seemed to take up half its face, and skin that shimmered like oil on water. When it spoke, the translator they had built from the original signal made its words understandable. "Unknown vessels, identify yourselves. This is Commander Velthar of the Galactic Council Defense Fleet." Jake stepped forward. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Defiance." We received your distress signal and came to help. The alien's expression changed. Its large eyes grew even wider, and its 6 arms moved in what looked like agitation. You brought primitives to fight the swarm. Your species still uses kinetic weapons and chemical explosives. This was a mistake. Behind Jake, Admiral Susan Blake stepped into view. She was commanding the human task force from her flagship, the U's Valiant, but she had transferred to the Defiance for first contact. Her face was calm, but Jake could see the anger in her eyes. "Commander Velthor," she said, "we came here because you asked for help. If you don't want it, we can leave." "No, wait," the alien said quickly. "We cannot afford to turn away any assistance. But you must understand, the Void Swarm has destroyed fleets 1,000 times more advanced than yours. They have weapons that can crack planets. They have shields that can stop any energy beam. They learn from every battle and adapt instantly." "We understand," Jake said, "but maybe that's the problem. Maybe you've been fighting them the wrong way." Before Velthor could respond, alarms began ringing on both ships. The tactical display lit up with red contacts approaching from multiple directions. "Swarm ships incoming," Kate reported. At least 50 vessels, various sizes. Jake had studied every piece of tactical data the aliens had sent. The swarm ships looked like metal spiders made of sharp angles and weapon ports. They moved in perfect coordination, surrounding the small fleet of human and alien vessels. "Commander Velthar," Admiral Blake said over the comm, "we need to work together. What's your standard battle plan?" "We maintain formation and use long range weapons. Our shields can protect us if we keep our distance." Jake looked at Kate. She was shaking her head. "Admiral Jake said permission to try something different?" "What do you have in mind?" "As machines learn from standard tactics, let's show them something they've never seen before." Admiral Blake was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "All ships, this is Admiral Blake. Follow Captain Morrison's lead. We're going to do this the human way." Jake turned to his crew. "Kate, target their biggest ship. Lisa, plot a ramming course. Ryan, tell engineering to prepare for full power." "Sir," Kate said, "a ramming course is suicide. Not if we do it right. These aliens have been fighting like civilized beings. Time to show them what barbarians can do." The Defiance broke formation and accelerated directly toward the center of the swarm fleet. The alien ships immediately began firing, but their energy weapons were designed to fight enemies who maintained safe distances. "All power to forward shields," Jake ordered. "Kate, fire everything we have at their main ship." The human weapons were crude compared to alien technology: nuclear missiles, railgun projectiles, and chemical lasers. But they worked differently than anything the swarm had faced. The machines had learned to counter energy weapons and exotic matter projectiles. They had never fought enemies who used simple kinetic force. "Direct hit on their shields," Kate reported. "They're adapting, but it's taking time." "Good, Lisa. Emergency turn to port. Make it look like we're retreating." The Defiance spun away from the swarm ships, but Jake wasn't retreating. He was setting up for Phase 2 of his plan. "Ryan, signal the fleet. Tell them to follow our lead and attack." From all sides at once, the other human ships had been watching the Defiance's attack. Now they understood what Jake was doing. Instead of maintaining formation like the aliens expected, the human fleet scattered in all directions. The EU's Valiant came in from above, firing its main guns at the swarm ships trying to pursue the Defiance. The destroyers attacked from the sides, using their speed to avoid the enemy weapons. The cruisers provided cover fire, their missiles creating chaos in the swarm formation. "The swarm is trying to adapt," Kate reported. "But they can't predict our movements." "That's because we're not following any plan," Jake said. "We're improvising." Commander Velthor's voice came over the comm. "Captain Morrison, your tactics are completely illogical. You're attacking from too many directions at once. You're exposing your flanks. You're ignoring basic defensive principles." "Exactly," Jake replied. "And that's why it's working." The swarm ships were indeed confused. The artificial intelligence was designed to analyze enemy tactics and develop counters. But the humans weren't following any recognizable tactical doctrine. They were fighting like they were still in the atmosphere of their dangerous homeworld, where survival meant being unpredictable. Dr. Amy Rodriguez was watching the battle from the medical bay. She was the fleet's xenobiologist, and she had spent months studying the alien data about the swarm. What she was seeing now confirmed her theories. "Captain," she said over the comm, "the swarm's adaptation protocols are overloading. They're trying to counter 5 different tactical approaches at once, and they can't process that much data fast enough. How long do we have? Maybe 10 minutes? Before they figure out a solution?" Jake looked at the tactical display. The swarm fleet was larger than the human force, but they were starting to show signs of confusion. Ships were firing at targets that were no longer there. Their formation was breaking apart as they tried to counter attacks from multiple directions. "Kate, how are our weapons working?" "It's better than expected. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons, but our kinetic rounds are getting through. And our nuclear missiles are doing damage even when they don't penetrate." "Good. All ships concentrate fire on their command vessel, the big one in the center." The human fleet converged. On the largest swarm ship was the size of a small city, covered in weapons and armor. But it had never been designed to fight enemies who were willing to get close enough to use primitive weapons. The US Valiant fired its main railgun at point-blank range, the tungsten projectile, moving at a significant fraction of light speed, punched through the swarm ship's hull like it was made of paper. The destroyer US Ranger followed up with a spread of nuclear missiles that detonated inside the enemy ship. "Their command ship is breaking apart," Kate reported. "The other swarm ships are losing coordination without their central intelligence." The swarm ships began acting independently. Some continued attacking, but others started retreating. A few seemed to be trying to analyze the human ships, but they couldn't understand what they were seeing. "This is incredible," Commander Velthar said. "In 3 centuries of fighting, no one has ever destroyed a swarm command ship." "How did you do it?" Admiral Blake answered. "We didn't try to outsmart them. We just hit them with everything we had and hoped for the best. That's not a strategy. That's chaos." "Sometimes chaos is exactly what you need," Jake said. The battle was over in 20 minutes. Half the swarm ships had been destroyed, and the rest were retreating into deep space. The human fleet had taken some damage, but no ships had been lost. Colonel Ryan Hayes was leading the Marine contingent aboard the EU's Valiant. He had been watching the battle and thinking about what came next. "Admiral," he said, "we need to board one of those damaged swarm ships. We need to understand how they work." "Is that safe?"
Out.
"Probably not, but we're going to do it anyway."
Out.
An hour later, Ryan and his Marines were cutting through the hull of a crippled swarm vessel. The ship was still alive, its systems trying to repair the damage. But it was moving slowly, like it was in shock. "This is amazing," said Dr. Rodriguez, who had joined the boarding party. "The ship's interior is completely mechanical. No crew quarters, no life support. It's like a giant robot." "Can we learn anything useful?" "Maybe the computer systems are more advanced than anything we have, but they're also more fragile. They're designed to process massive amounts of data very quickly, but they can't handle unexpected inputs." Ryan nodded. "So they're smart, but not flexible." "Exactly. And flexibility is what humans do best." As the Marines explored the swarm ship, Jake was meeting with Commander Velthar aboard the alien vessel. The news spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The humans had won a battle against the Void Swarm, for the first time in 3 centuries. A swarm command ship had been destroyed. Species that had been preparing for extinction suddenly had. Hope Captain Jake Morrison stood in the briefing room of the US Valiant, looking at star charts that showed the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas controlled by the swarm. Blue zones showed Council territory. The red was winning by a huge margin. "The Kepler system is our next target," said Commander Velthor. "The swarm has trapped our evacuation fleet there. 50. 1,000 civilian ships carrying 2 million refugees." Admiral Susan Blake studied the tactical display. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 2 days before the swarm breaks through our defenses. The refugee ships are too slow to escape, and we don't. Have enough warships to protect them?" Jake looked at the numbers. The swarm had sent over 300 ships to Kepler. The combined human and council fleet had maybe 60 vessels. The odds were terrible, but that had never stopped humans before. "What's the terrain like?" asked Colonel Ryan Hayes. He was thinking like a ground soldier, looking for advantages that space battles usually didn't offer. "Terrain?" Velthar seemed confused. "It's space. There is no terrain." "He means obstacles," Jake explained. "Asteroids, planets, anything we can use for cover or tactical advantage." "Yes, the Kepler system has an asteroid belt and several gas giants. But those are navigational hazards, not tactical assets." Jake and Ryan exchanged looks. The aliens thought like pilots, not like soldiers. They saw space as an open battlefield where the largest fleet usually won. But humans had learned to fight in jungles, mountains, and cities. They knew how to use the environment as a weapon. "We need to see the system layout," Jake said.
Oh.
"And we need to think like guerrillas, not like fleet commanders." 2 hours later, the human fleet was approaching the Kepler system. The swarm had formed a blockade around the refugee ships, slowly tightening the circle. The Council Defense Fleet was fighting desperately, but they were outnumbered 5-1. "All ships, this is Admiral Blake. We're going to split up and hit them from multiple directions. But this time, we're going to use the system against them." Captain Tony Martinez was commanding the destroyer U.S. Ranger. He had grown up in the asteroid belt around Earth, mining rocks and dodging debris. He understood space terrain better than most people. "Admiral, I'm taking my squadron through the asteroid belt. We can use the rocks for cover and hit their flanks." "Do it, Jake. Take your group toward the gas giant. Use its gravity well to slingshot around and hit their rear." The human ships scattered in all directions, leaving the Council fleet confused. This wasn't how space battles were supposed to work. Fleets were supposed to stay together and concentrate their firepower. Captain Morrison, Commander Velthor, said over the comm, "You're dividing your forces. That's tactically unsound." "Unsound if you fight like everyone else," Jake replied. "But we're not everyone else." The used Defiance dove toward the gas giant, Kepler 7. The massive planet's gravity grabbed the ship and accelerated it around the planet's curve. Jake used the gravitational boost to gain speed and approach the swarm fleet from an unexpected direction. "Kate, target their supply ships. They're the ones in the back, probably not expecting an attack." Lieutenant Commander Kate Sullivan had been studying swarm tactics for weeks. She had noticed that they always protected their combat ships, but left their support vessels vulnerable. Firing nuclear missiles. Time to impact, 30 seconds. The swarm ships detected the incoming missiles and began defensive maneuvers. The missiles were coming from the direction of the gas giant, where their sensors had interference from the planet's magnetic field. "Direct hits on 3 supply ships," Kate reported. "They're breaking apart." Meanwhile, Captain Martinez was playing hide-and-seek in the asteroid belt. His ships would pop out from behind a large rock, fire their weapons, then disappear again. Before the swarm could target them, "It's like hunting in a forest," he told his crew. "Use the trees for cover, take your shots, then move to a new position." The swarm ships were getting frustrated. They were designed to fight in open space, where their superior numbers and firepower could be used effectively. But the humans were turning the battle into a series of small skirmishes, never staying in one place long enough to be overwhelmed. Engineer Linda Foster was working frantically in the EU's Valiant's engineering section. She had been studying the swarm technology they had captured, looking for weaknesses that human weapons could exploit. "Admiral, I've got something," she said over the comm. "The swarm ships use a distributed power system. If we can overload their power grid, their weapons and shields will fail. How do we do that? Nuclear weapons. But not the way we've been using them. Instead of trying to destroy their ships, we detonate the nukes close enough to create electromagnetic pulses. Their systems are more sensitive to EMP than ours. Do it." Linda's new tactic worked better than anyone had expected. The human ships began using their nuclear weapons like giant flashbulbs, creating electromagnetic pulses that scrambled swarm electronics. The enemy ships would suddenly go dark, their weapons stopping, their shields failing. "This is incredible," said Dr. Amy Rodriguez, who was monitoring the battle from the medical bay. "The swarm's adaptive protocols can't handle this." They're trying to counter a dozen different tactics at once. The breakthrough came when Jake realized something important about the swarm's behavior. They were machines, which meant they followed patterns, and patterns could be predicted. Kate watched their movement. Every time we hit them with EMP, they regroup in the same formation. They're trying to use their standard recovery protocol. I see it. They're pulling back to grid formation 7. Perfect. All ships converge on grid formation 7. Hit them while they're regrouping. The human fleet attacked the swarm ships just as they were trying to reorganize. The enemy vessels were caught in the middle of a formation change. Their weapons pointing in the wrong directions, their shields partially down. Multiple swarm ships destroyed, Kate reported. Their formation is collapsing. But the swarm was. Learning, the remaining ships began adapting to the human tactics. They stopped using their standard formations and started fighting more randomly. They're getting smarter, Jake said. We need to end this fast. Colonel Ryan Hayes had been watching the battle and thinking about urban warfare. In cities, the side with local knowledge usually won, even against superior forces. Admiral, we need to get our Marines onto those refugee ships. If the swarm tries to board them, they'll find humans waiting. The refugees are civilians. We can't turn them into soldiers. We don't need to. We just need to show the swarm that humans are willing to fight anywhere, anytime. 30 minutes later, human Marines were boarding the refugee ships. The civilians were terrified at first, but the Marines quickly organized them into defensive positions. If the swarm wanted to capture these ships, they would have to fight for every corridor. The psychological effect was immediate. The swarm ships began pulling back from the refugee fleet. Their intelligence indicated that the ships were now defended by the same species that had been causing them so much trouble. "They're actually afraid of us," Captain Martinez said with amazement. Machines that have been destroying the galaxy for 3 centuries are afraid of a few thousand humans with guns. The battle turned into a rout. The swarm ships that could still move began retreating from the system. The ones that couldn't were destroyed by the combined human and council fleet. Victory, Commander Velthor said, and his voice carried a mix of relief and disbelief. The refugees are safe. The swarm is retreating. Jake looked at the tactical display. They had won another battle, but the war was far from over. The swarm would learn from this defeat and adapt. Next time, they would be ready for human tactics.
Admiral,
He said to Blake, "We need to talk about strategy. Can't keep fighting the same way and expect to win." "What do you mean we're fighting their war on their terms? We're reacting to their attacks instead of making them react to ours. We need to go on the offensive." Dr. Carl Johnson had been listening to the conversation from the science station. He was a physicist who had been studying the swarm's technology, and he had some ideas about how to hurt them. "Captain Morrison is right," he said. "The swarm's greatest advantage is their ability to adapt. But adaptation takes time. If we can hit them faster than they can learn, we might be able to stay ahead of them. What do you suggest?"
We need
"To find their production facilities, the places where they build new ships and repair damaged ones. If we can destroy those, we can cripple their ability to replace their losses." Admiral Blake nodded slowly. "That means going deep into swarm territory. It's a suicide mission." "Maybe," Jake said, "but it's also our best chance to end this war. And if there's one thing humans are good at, it's suicide missions that turn out not to be suicide after all." The refugee fleet was already preparing to leave for safer territory. The civilian ships were slow and vulnerable, but they were alive. 2 million beings who had been facing certain death were now heading toward council worlds where they could rebuild their lives as the human fleet. Prepared to follow them, Jake received a message from Earth. The message came from Earth at 0400 hours, ship time. Admiral Susan Blake was asleep in her quarters when the priority signal woke her up. She read it twice before she believed what it said. The void swarm had found Earth. Out. All senior officers. To the bridge immediately, she announced over the comm system. Within minutes, the command deck of the EU's Valiant was filled with worried faces. "How many ships?" asked Captain Jake Morrison. "Long-range sensors show at least 500 swarm vessels heading toward the solar system. They'll arrive in 6. Dazed, the room went quiet. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Earth's home defense fleet had maybe 50 ships, most of them older models. The orbital defense platforms were powerful, but they couldn't move. Against 500 swarm ships, Earth didn't stand a chance. "We have to go back," said Colonel Ryan Hayes. "We have to defend our home." "If we go back, we abandon the offensive," Admiral Blake replied. "We're 3 days away from hitting their main production facility. If we can destroy it, we cripple their ability to build new ships." Jake looked at the star charts. The human fleet was deep in swarm territory, farther from Earth than any human ship had ever traveled. They had been preparing to attack the enemy's central manufacturing world. It's a place where most of their new ships were built. "We split the fleet," he said finally. "Half goes back to defend Earth. Half continues the mission." "That leaves both forces outnumbered." "Yes, but if we do nothing, Earth dies, and the swarm keeps building ships forever. At least this way, we have a chance." Admiral Blake made the decision that would define the rest of the war. "Jake, take half the fleet and continue to the target. I'll take the other half back to Earth." General Paul Wright was already coordinating Earth's defense when Admiral Blake's message arrived. He'd been a soldier for 30 years, fighting in conflicts around the world, but this was different. This time the enemy was coming from space, and there was nowhere to retreat. "Status report," he said to his staff. "All orbital platforms are armed and ready. The defense fleet is in position around the moon. Civilian evacuation is proceeding, but we can only move maybe 10% of the population to the underground shelters." Paul looked at the tactical display. Earth's defenses were impressive by human standards, but the swarm had been destroying entire star systems. What chance did one planet have? "Sir," said his aide, Commander Steve Baker, "we're receiving a transmission from the Defiance. Captain Morrison is continuing his mission to attack the swarm production facility. Good, if we're going to die, at least we'll take some of them with us." But Paul Wright had no intention of dying. He had spent weeks studying the battle reports from Kepler and the other human victories. The key was not to fight the swarm the way they expected. Humans had to be unpredictable, chaotic, willing to take risks that no sane species would consider. "Steve, I want you to coordinate with the civilian authorities. We're going to turn Earth itself into a weapon." Meanwhile, Jake Morrison was leading his half of the fleet deeper into swarm territory. The enemy production facility was located in a star system that had once been home to a species called the Voronouth. The swarm had consumed the entire civilization and turned their worlds into machine factories. "Captain," said Dr. Laura Kim from the science station, "I'm reading massive energy signatures from the target system. Whatever they're building in there, it's huge." Laura had been working with Council scientists to develop new weapons that combined human creativity with alien technology. Her latest invention was something she called chaos torpedoes, missiles that randomly changed their behavior mid-flight, making them impossible for the swarm to predict or counter. "How many swarm ships are defending the facility?" "At least 200. But they're mostly older models, probably left behind when the main fleet went to attack Earth." Jake smiled grimly. The swarm had made a mistake. They had divided their forces, sending their best ships to attack Earth while leaving their production facility defended by second-rate vessels. "Kate, start charging the chaos torpedoes. We're going in fast and hard." Lieutenant Commander Kate Sullivan had become an expert at fighting the swarm. She had studied their tactics, learned their weaknesses, and developed new ways to exploit them. But this battle would be different. They weren't just trying to win a fight, they were trying to cripple the enemy's ability to make war. Torpedoes ready. All ships report weapons armed and ready to begin the attack. The human ships burst into the Voronoth system like avenging angels. They didn't try to maintain formation or follow standard tactics. Instead, they scattered in all directions, each ship captain free to attack whatever target looked most vulnerable. The swarm defenders were caught completely off guard. They had been expecting a traditional fleet engagement where both sides would line up and exchange fire until one was destroyed. Instead, they found themselves fighting dozens of individual battles at the same time, Captain. Tony Martinez took his destroyer squadron straight at the main production facility. The massive structure was the size of a small moon, covered in shipyards and manufacturing complexes. Hundreds of new swarm ships were under construction in its docking bays. All ships target the main reactor complex. If we can overload their power grid, the whole facility will shut down. The Chaos torpedoes worked exactly as Dr. Kim had designed them. The swarm point defense systems tried to intercept them, but the missiles kept changing course at random intervals. Some accelerated, some slowed down, some even looped back on themselves before resuming their original trajectory. Direct hits. On the reactor complex, Kate reported. Secondary explosions throughout the facility, but the swarm was fighting back. Their ships might have been older models, but there were still a lot of them. The human fleet was taking heavy damage as they pressed their attack. Hull breach on Deck 7, reported the damage control officer. We're losing atmosphere. Seal it off, Jake ordered. Engineering, I need more power to the weapons. Engineer Linda Foster was working miracles in the engine room. She had modified the ship's reactor to run at 120% capacity, well beyond safe limits. The extra power was flowing to the weapons and shields, giving the Defiance a fighting chance against superior numbers. Captain, I can give you 10 more minutes at this power level. After that, the reactor will overload. 10 minutes is all we need. The battle was reaching its climax. Half the swarm production facility was already destroyed, but the remaining defenders were fighting desperately to protect what was left. They had finally adapted to the human tactics and were beginning to coordinate their attacks more effectively. Sir, Kate said, the swarm ships are learning our patterns. They're predicting our movements. Then we need new patterns. All ships, Emergency Maneuver 7. Emergency Maneuver 7 wasn't a real tactical formation. It was something Jake had just made up. The order told each ship captain to do whatever seemed most likely to confuse the enemy. The results were spectacular. Some ships accelerated directly at the swarm vessels, as if planning to ram them. Others spun in circles while firing in all directions. One destroyer captain actually flew his ship backwards while shooting over his shoulder. The swarm's artificial intelligence couldn't process what it was seeing. The human tactics made no sense from a military standpoint, but they were working. Swarm ships were being destroyed faster than they could adapt to the chaotic human behavior. Meanwhile, back at Earth, the battle for humanity's homeworld was beginning. Admiral Blake had arrived just hours before the swarm fleet. The defense was desperate and heroic. The orbital platforms opened fire first, their massive guns hurling projectiles at the incoming enemy ships. The swarm vessels began taking damage immediately, but there were so many of them that some were bound to get through. General Wright had prepared a surprise for the invaders. Hidden throughout Earth's solar system were nuclear mines, old warheads that had been converted into space weapons. When the swarm ships entered the inner system, the mines began detonating. Multiple swarm vessels destroyed, reported Commander Baker, but they're still coming. At least 300 ships are still operational. The battle moved to Earth's atmosphere. Swarm fighters dove toward the planet's surface, trying to destroy the military installations and population centers. But they found themselves fighting not just the defense fleet, but the planet itself. Earth's gravity was stronger than most worlds. Its atmosphere was thick and turbulent. Its magnetic field interfered with sensitive electronics. The swarm ships had been designed to fight in the sterile environment of space, not in the chaotic conditions around a living world. Human fighter pilots, trained to fly in Earth's dangerous skies, had a huge advantage. They knew how to use wind, shear, and magnetic storms as weapons. They could hide in cloud cover and use atmospheric pressure to increase their weapons. Effectiveness, Captain Rachel Stone was leading a squadron of interceptors against a group of swarm bombers heading for New York City. Her pilots were outnumbered 3-1, but they had the home field advantage. Stay low and use the buildings for cover, she ordered. These machines don't know how to fight in a gravity well. The human pilots dove between skyscrapers, using the city's architecture to break up the swarm formation. The battle for Earth had been raging for 18 hours when something unexpected happened. The Void Swarm stopped attacking. Admiral Susan Blake stood on the bridge of the EU's Valiant, watching the tactical display with confusion. Moments before, Hundreds of swarm ships had been pressing their assault on Earth's defenses. Now they were pulling back, forming a defensive circle around the planet. Admiral reported Communications Officer Ryan Davis, "We're receiving a transmission from the swarm fleet. It's not like their usual signals. I put it through." The main screen filled with an image that no human had ever seen before. Instead of the usual mechanical interface, they were looking at something that resembled a face. It was made of metal and circuitry, but it had recognizable features: eyes, a mouth, thing that might have been a nose. When it spoke, its voice was different from the emotionless tones they had heard from swarm ships before. This voice had something that sounded almost like personality. "I am the central intelligence of the Void Swarm. I wish to communicate with the species known as humans." Blake stepped forward. "This is Admiral Susan Blake of the United Earth Fleet. You're attacking our homeworld. We're listening. Your species presents a unique problem. For 3,000 cycles, we have consumed civilizations across this galaxy. Each species follows predictable patterns. They fight with logic, retreat when faced with superior force, and eventually surrender when defeat becomes inevitable. We're not like other species, correct? You fight without logic. You advance when you should retreat. You take risks that should result in your extinction, yet you survive. Our analysis indicates that continued conflict with your species will result in mutual destruction." Blake felt a chill run down her spine. The swarm was actually afraid of humanity. These machines that had destroyed 1,000 worlds were backing down because humans were too unpredictable to fight.
What are you
"Proposing withdrawal? We will cease our expansion in this region of the galaxy. Your species and your allies will be left alone. In exchange, you will not pursue us into the Outer Rim territories." Before Blake could respond, Captain Jake Morrison's voice came over the comm system. His fleet had just arrived from their successful attack on the swarm production facility. "Admiral, this is Jake. We're detecting massive swarm fleet movements throughout the galaxy. They're pulling back from all their forward positions." The Central Intelligence continued speaking. "The destruction of our primary construction facility has demonstrated that your species poses an unacceptable threat to our expansion. The cost of defeating you exceeds the value of the resources in this region." Blake looked around the bridge. Her crew was staring at the screen in amazement. The Void Swarm, the terror of the galaxy for 3 centuries, was essentially offering to surrender. "We need guarantees," Blake said. "How do we know you won't return when you've built up your forces again? We adapt. We've learned that some prey is not worth hunting. Your species will be classified as a non-viable target for future expansion." Commander Velthor's voice came over the comm from his ship in the fleet. "Admiral Blake, this is unprecedented. In 3 centuries of war, the swarm has never retreated from a system they wanted to claim." Jake Morrison docked with the Valiant. An hour later, he met with Admiral Blake in the conference room, along with the senior officers from both fleets. The mood was strange. They had won the war, but nobody quite knew how to feel about it. "Is it really over?" asked Colonel Ryan Hayes. "The swarm ships are already leaving the system," Blake replied. Long-range sensors showed them withdrawing from council space throughout the galaxy. Dr. Carl Johnson had been analyzing the swarm's retreat patterns. "They're not just pulling back. They're actually leaving this part of the galaxy entirely, moving toward the Outer Rim, beyond the known star charts." Jake looked out the viewport at Earth. The planet looked peaceful now, its blue oceans and white clouds unmarked by the battle that had nearly destroyed it. But he knew things would never be the same. What happens now? The answer came from an unexpected source. President Nancy Roberts appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from Earth. She had been coordinating the planet's defense from deep underground bunkers. But now, she was addressing the entire human fleet. "To all our brave men and women in space," she said, "Earth is safe. Alien threat has been neutralized. But this experience has taught us something important about our place in the universe." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "The Galactic Council has offered us membership in their organization. They want to share their advanced technology with us. They want us to join their peaceful civilization." Titan. He had a feeling he knew what the president was going to say next. "After careful consideration, Earth's government has decided to decline their offer. We will not be joining the Galactic Council." The conference room erupted in surprised voices, but the president continued speaking. Instead, we are forming our own alliance. The Terran Alliance will be open to any species that shares our values of independence, self-reliance, and the right to defend ourselves against any threat. Dr. Ben Walsh, who had been the first to decode the alien distress signal, was now serving as Earth's chief diplomat. He appeared on screen next to the president. We've already received applications from 15 different species. Worlds that the Council considered too primitive or too violent for membership. Species that live on dangerous planets like Earth. Species that understand that sometimes you have to fight for what you believe in. Jake smiled. It made sense. Humans had never been good at following other people's rules. They worked better when they made their own decisions and fought their own battles. Over the following months, the Terran Alliance grew rapidly. Species that had been rejected by the Council found acceptance among the humans. Worlds that had been considered too dangerous for civilized beings became important trade partners. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to admiral, established the first human colony outside the solar system. New Terra was located in a system that the Council had marked as unsuitable for habitation. Too many asteroids. Too much radiation, too unstable to support a civilized world. But humans thrived there. They built cities and asteroid caverns and space stations that could withstand radiation storms. They turned the system's dangers into advantages, using the asteroid belt for mining and the radiation fields to hide their military installations. Commander Velthor visited New Terra 6. Months after its founding, he walked through the colony's corridors with amazement, watching humans work in conditions that would kill most Council species. "How do you live like this?" he asked Jake. "We're used to it. Earth prepared us for environments like this," compared. "To our homeworld, this is actually pretty comfortable. The Council underestimated your species. We thought you were primitive because you used simple weapons and fought in chaotic formations. We didn't realize that your apparent primitiveness was actually an advantage." Jake nodded. Sometimes the best solution to a complex problem is a simple one. Sometimes the best way to fight a sophisticated enemy is with unsophisticated tactics. Galactic Council had to rebuild their entire civilization. Hundreds of worlds had been lost to the swarm, and millions of refugees needed new homes. But for the first time in centuries, they had hope. The threat that had terrorized the galaxy was gone. Dr. Amy Rodriguez was working with Council scientists to study the abandoned swarm ships. They were learning incredible things about artificial intelligence and adaptive technology, but they were also discovering something else. The swarm wasn't evil, she told Jake during one of his visits to the research station. They were just following their programming. They were designed to expand and consume, and they did exactly what they were built to do until they met us. Right? We were the first species they encountered that couldn't be categorized. We didn't fit any of their behavioral models. So they did what any intelligent system would do when faced with an unsolvable problem. They chose to avoid it entirely. Years passed. The Terran Alliance became a major power in the galaxy, not through conquest, but through cooperation. Human colonies spread throughout space, this often in systems that other species considered uninhabitable. The humans became known as problem solvers. When disasters struck, when impossible situations arose, when no one else could find a solution, the call went out. Get the humans. The Deathworlders will know what to do. Jake Morrison, now a fleet admiral with gray hair and lines around his eyes, stood on the observation deck of the Taz Enterprise. Through the viewport, he could see New Terra's capital city, sprawling across 3 asteroids connected by enclosed bridges. Admiral said his aide, Captain Lisa Park, were receiving a distress signal from the Outer Rim. A new threat has emerged from dark space. The Council is asking for assistance. Jake smiled. It was the same smile he had worn years ago when the first alien distress signal had reached Earth. Humanity had answered that call and saved the galaxy. Now they were being asked to do it again. "Signal the fleet," he said. "The Deathworlders are on the way." The galaxy had sent a signal, asking for help from anyone who could fight. Earth had answered that call with ships and soldiers, and the stubborn refusal to give up that had carried humanity through its entire history.